Abuela, why are there so many white stones?
Today you'll discover the heartwarming story of 6-year-old Tommy Martinez, whose innocent gesture, with a small toy flag at Arlington National Cemetery, created a moment so powerful that it touched the hearts of veterans around the world. Get ready for a touching narrative that shows how the purest acts of respect can come from the smallest hands and biggest hearts. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening to this story from. It was a warm spring morning in May when the Martinez family arrived at Arlington National Cemetery for what would become one of the most memorable visits in the cemetery's long history. The cherry blossoms had just finished blooming, leaving a carpet of pale pink petals scattered across the pathways that wound between the endless rows of white marble headstones. 6-year-old Tommy Martinez clutched his small American flag tightly in his right hand as he walked between his grandparents, Elena and Carlos Martinez. The flag was nothing special, just a simple toy flag he had received at a Memorial Day parade the previous year. It was slightly faded from being carried everywhere, with a small tear near one corner where Tommy had accidentally caught it on a fence. But to Tommy, this little flag was precious beyond measure. Elena Martinez had been planning this visit for months. Her late husband, Sergeant First Class Miguel Martinez, had served 3 tours in Vietnam and had always spoken about the honor and dignity of Arlington National Cemetery. Though Miguel had been laid to rest in their hometown cemetery in San Antonio, Texas, Eleanor wanted her grandson to understand the sacred nature of military service and sacrifice. "Abuela, why are there so many white stones?" Tommy asked, his young voice filled with curiosity as they walked along the perfectly maintained pathways. "Each one represents a brave soldier who gave their life for our country, mijo," Elena explained gently, her weathered hand resting on Tommy's shoulder. "They're all heroes, every single one of them." Single. Carlos, Elena's brother, and a Korean War veteran himself, pointed toward the distant white structure that was their destination. "We're going to see something very special today, Tommy. There's a place where soldiers stand guard over other soldiers, even though those soldiers died a long time ago." As they approached the tomb of the unknown soldier, Tommy's eyes grew wide with wonder. The imposing white marble structure seemed to glow in the morning sunlight, and the precision of the guard's movements was unlike anything the 6-year-old had ever witnessed. Standing guard was Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, a member of the elite 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment. His uniform was immaculate, every detail perfect, from the gleaming brass buttons to the razor-sharp creases in his trousers. His rifle, a modified M14, was polished to a mirror finish, and his white gloves were spotless despite the early morning humidity. Tommy watched in fascination as Sergeant Chen executed his 21-step walk across the black mat. Each step was precisely 24 inches, each turn executed with balletic grace. The young boy had never seen anything so formal, so respectful, so completely dedicated to a single purpose. "Why does he walk like that, abuelo?" Tommy whispered, tugging on Carlos's sleeve. "He's showing respect, mijo. Those soldiers under that white stone died far from home, and their families never got to say goodbye. So this guard, and others like him, make sure they're never alone," Carlos explained, his own military experience helping him appreciate the profound dedication they were witnessing. As the Martinez family settled into position among the growing crowd of visitors, Tommy became completely absorbed in watching Staff Sergeant Chen's methodical routine. The 6-year-old's attention span, usually limited to a few minutes at most, seemed to expand as he witnessed something that spoke to a deeper understanding within him. The morning crowd was typical for Arlington, a mix of tourists, school groups, and families like the Martinez family who had come to pay their respects. Among them stood retired Marine Colonel Patricia Williams, who was visiting with her own granddaughter. Colonel Williams had served 30 years in the Corps, including deployments in the Gulf War and Iraq, and she never missed an opportunity to visit Arlington when she was in the Washington area. "Grandma Pat, why is everyone so quiet?" asked 7-year-old Emma Williams, Colonel Williams' granddaughter. "Because this is a sacred place, sweetheart. We're in the presence of heroes, and heroes deserve our respect and our silence," the colonel replied, her voice carrying the authority of decades of military service. Tommy overheard this exchange and looked up at his grandmother with new understanding. He had been to church with Eleanor many times, and he recognized that same feeling of reverence here. This was a holy place, but instead of being dedicated to God alone, It was dedicated to people who had given everything for others. Staff Sergeant Chen continued his precise movements, unaware that his every step was being studied by a 6-year-old boy who was beginning to understand something profound about duty and honor. Chen had been serving as a tomb guard for 8 months, and the responsibility never felt routine. Each day brought new visitors, new faces, new opportunities to honor the unknown soldiers who lay beneath the marble. Behind his stoic expression, Chen was thinking about his own journey to this moment. Growing up in a military family in California, he had always known he would serve. His father had been a Navy pilot, his grandfather an Army medic in World War II, but it wasn't until he stood his first watch at the tomb that he truly understood what service meant. The selection process to become a tomb guard was grueling. Physical requirements were strict. Guards had to meet specific height and weight standards, maintain perfect physical fitness, and demonstrate unwavering mental discipline. But the real test was emotional and spiritual. Guards had to internalize the weight of their responsibility, understanding that they were not just performing a ceremony, but maintaining a sacred trust. As Tommy continued to watch, he noticed something that most adults missed. Every time Sergeant Chen turned to face the tomb, his expression would soften almost imperceptibly. It was subtle, lasting only a fraction of a second, but Tommy's young eyes caught it. In that brief moment, the guard wasn't just a soldier performing a duty. He was a human being acknowledging other human beings who had made the ultimate sacrifice. Elena noticed her grandson's intense concentration and felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness. Miguel would have loved to see this moment, to watch his grandson beginning to understand the values that had guided his own life. She remembered how Miguel used to tell Tommy stories about his fellow soldiers, always emphasizing their courage and their sacrifice for others. "Tommy," Elena whispered, "your abuelo Miguel used to say that the bravest people are those who put others before themselves. That's what these soldiers did, and that's what this guard is honoring." Tommy nodded solemnly, his small hand tightening around his toy flag. The flag had been with him through many adventures, trips to the park, visits to friends, even a few sleepovers, but somehow, holding it here felt different. It felt important in a way he couldn't quite explain. As the morning progressed, Tommy began to notice other details that escaped most visitors. He saw how Sergeant Chen's breathing remained perfectly controlled, despite the physical demands of his routine. He noticed how the guard's eyes never wavered from their focus, how his bearing remained proud and strong, even as sweat began to form on his forehead in the warming spring air. The changing of the guard ceremony was scheduled for 11 o'clock, and as the time approached, the crowd began to grow larger. Visitors positioned themselves along the barriers, cameras ready to capture the solemn ritual. But Tommy wasn't thinking about taking pictures. Something was building inside him, a feeling he couldn't name but felt with overwhelming intensity. Colonel Williams, standing nearby with her granddaughter, noticed the young boy's rapt attention. As a career military officer, she recognized something special in Tommy's demeanor. This wasn't just childhood curiosity. This was genuine respect and understanding, rare qualities in someone so young. "That little boy gets it," she murmured to her granddaughter. "Look at how he's watching. He understands that this is something important." Emma looked over at Tommy and saw what her grandmother meant. While other children in the crowd were fidgeting or asking to leave, Tommy stood perfectly still, his eyes never leaving the guard, his small flag held respectfully at his side. As 11 o'clock approached, the relief guard began his approach. Specialist David Park, the incoming guard, marched with the same precision and dignity that had characterized the ceremony for over 80 years. His uniform was equally immaculate, his bearing equally proud. Tommy watched the intricate ritual unfold, mesmerized by the precision and respect demonstrated by both guards. But as the ceremony reached its climax, something unexpected began to stir in the young boy's heart. He looked down at his small, worn flag, then up at the imposing tomb, then at the guard who had spent the last hour honoring unknown soldiers with such dedication. The changing of the guard ceremony reached its most solemn moment as Staff Sergeant Chen and Specialist Park performed the intricate inspection ritual. Every button, every crease, every insignia was examined with microscopic attention to detail. Tommy watched with wide eyes as the two guards treated each other's uniforms and weapons with the same reverence they showed the tomb itself. "Why do they check everything so carefully, Abuela?" Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible. Because perfection is the only way to honor perfection, mijo, Elena replied softly. These soldiers want to make sure they're worthy of standing guard over such brave men. As the ceremony continued, Tommy felt something stirring deep within his 6-year-old heart. He looked down at his small toy flag, its red, white, and blue colors slightly faded but still vibrant in the morning sunlight. The flag had been his constant companion for almost a year, but suddenly it felt different in his hands, heavier somehow, more important. Colonel Williams, still observing from nearby, noticed the change in Tommy's demeanor. The boy's posture had straightened, his grip on the flag had tightened, and his expression had taken on a seriousness that seemed far beyond his years. She had seen that same look on the faces of young recruits when they first truly understood what it meant to serve. The inspection completed, Staff Sergeant Chen began his final march away from the tomb. His hour of duty was finished, but the weight of what he had just done, standing guard over America's unknown heroes, would stay with him forever. As he walked past the gathered crowd, maintaining his perfect military bearing, something unexpected happened. Tommy suddenly stepped forward. Before Elena or Carlos could react, their 6-year-old grandson had moved closer to the barrier, his small flag raised high above his head. But this wasn't a casual wave or a playful gesture. Tommy had positioned himself at attention, his little body mimicking the military posture he had been observing all morning. "Tommy," Elena called out softly, concern evident in her voice. But what happened next left everyone speechless. As Staff Sergeant Chen approached, Tommy slowly brought his toy flag down from above his head and held it across his chest with both hands, the way he had seen people hold flags during the Pledge of Allegiance at school. Then, with the utmost seriousness, he extended the flag toward the departing guard. The gesture was simple, innocent, and absolutely pure. This wasn't a child seeking attention or trying to be cute. This was a 6-year-old boy offering the most precious thing he owned to honor a soldier who had just honored other soldiers. The toy flag, worn and slightly tattered from a year of adventures, had become Tommy's way of saying thank you. Staff Sergeant Chen stopped. His training had prepared him for many situations, but nothing had prepared him for this moment of absolute innocence and respect. The hardened soldier looked down at the small boy, offering his treasured flag, and for a moment, the weight of military protocol seemed to fade away. The crowd held its collective breath. Security personnel who had initially moved toward Tommy froze in place as they realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Even Specialist Park, who had just begun his own hour of duty, glanced over to see what was happening. Chen's eyes met Tommy's, and in that instant, a profound communication passed between them. The guard saw in the boy's face the same respect and understanding that had motivated his own decision to serve. Tommy saw in the guard's eyes the dedication and sacrifice that his grandfather Miguel had embodied throughout his own military career. Then, Staff Sergeant Chen did something that would be remembered at Arlington National Cemetery for years to come. He slowly knelt down to Tommy's level, bringing himself eye to eye with the young boy. With the same precision and respect he had shown throughout his hour of duty, Chen reached out and gently accepted Tommy's offered flag. "Thank you, son," Chen whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "This means more than you know." But Chen wasn't finished. Holding Tommy's flag carefully in his left hand, he reached into his uniform pocket and withdrew something that made the crowd gasp. It was his own personal flag, a perfectly folded American flag that he carried with him during every shift at the tomb. This flag had been blessed by military chaplains, had been present during countless ceremonies, and represented everything Chen held sacred about his service. With the same reverence Tommy had shown, Chen offered his flag to the young boy. "A trade," he said simply. "Your flag will remind me why we do what we do. I hope mine will remind you that there are always people standing guard, protecting the things that matter most." Tommy's eyes filled with tears as he accepted the guard's flag. The fabric felt different from his toy flag, heavier, more substantial, imbued with a significance he could feel even if he couldn't fully understand it. This wasn't just a piece of cloth. It was a symbol of everything the guard represented. Elena and Carlos watched with tears streaming down their faces as their grandson carefully cradled his new flag. Colonel Williams, standing nearby, felt her own eyes welling up as she witnessed this exchange between generations, this passing of respect and understanding from a seasoned soldier to a child who somehow grasped the profound importance of what he was seeing. The moment stretched on, neither Chen nor Tommy wanting to break the connection they had forged, Around them, the crowd remained silent, understanding instinctively that they were witnessing something sacred, something that transcended the usual boundaries between visitor and guard, between child and soldier. Finally, Chen stood up, Tommy's toy flag still held respectfully in his hands. He came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute to the 6-year-old boy, who had just taught him something new about honor and respect. Tommy, still clutching Staff Sergeant Chen's flag to his chest, instinctively straightened his small shoulders and attempted to return the salute. His form wasn't perfect, his hand wasn't quite positioned correctly, and his elbow was a bit too high, but the sincerity behind the gesture was unmistakable. This wasn't a child playing soldier. This was a young boy offering the deepest respect he knew how to give. The exchange lasted only moments, but its impact rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Retired Marine Colonel Patricia Williams felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched the interaction unfold. In 30 years of military service, she had witnessed countless ceremonies and formal exchanges, but nothing had moved her quite like this simple trade between a guard and a child. "Grandma Pat, why are you crying?" Emma asked, tugging on her grandmother's sleeve. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, we see something so pure and beautiful that our hearts can't contain all the feelings," Colonel Williams replied, her voice trembling with emotion. Elena Martinez approached her grandson slowly, not wanting to disturb the sacred moment, but concerned about the breach of protocol. However, before she could speak, one of the cemetery's senior staff members, Sergeant Major Robert Hayes, approached the family with a gentle smile. "Mom, please don't worry," Sergeant Major Hayes said softly. "What your grandson just did represents the very best of what we're trying to preserve here. That was one of the most respectful gestures I've witnessed in my 25 years at Arlington." As Staff Sergeant Chen finally began to move away, he carried Tommy's toy flag with the same reverence he would show any military colors. The small faded flag had been transformed from a child's plaything into something sacred, a symbol of innocent respect and pure patriotism that would remind Chen of this moment for the rest of his life. Tommy stood quietly, still processing what had just happened. The flag in his hands felt heavy with responsibility and honor. He looked up at his grandmother, his young face serious and thoughtful. "Abuela, this flag is very important, isn't it?" he asked. "Yes, mijo, very important. That soldier gave you something very special because he saw something special in you," Elena replied, kneeling down to her grandson's level. Word of the exchange began to spread quickly through the crowd. Visitors who had witnessed the moment started sharing the story with others, and soon people throughout the cemetery were talking about the little boy who had traded flags with a tomb guard. Many visitors extended their own stays, hoping to catch a glimpse of Tommy and perhaps share in the emotional impact of what they had heard. Among those moved by the story was retired Army Captain James Rodriguez, who had been visiting the grave of his son, killed in Afghanistan 3 years earlier. Rodriguez had been struggling with grief and anger, questioning whether his son's sacrifice had meant anything to a nation that seemed increasingly divided and disconnected from military service. "Excuse me," Rodriguez approached the Martinez family, his voice hesitant but sincere. "I heard about what your grandson did. I just wanted to thank him, and to thank you for raising a child who understands respect." Carlos Martinez, recognizing a fellow veteran in Rodriguez's bearing and demeanor, extended his hand. "Korea 1952 to 54, he said simply. "Afghanistan, multiple deployments. Lost my boy there in 2019, Rodriguez replied, accepting the handshake. The two veterans stood in comfortable silence for a moment, understanding passing between them without need for words. Tommy, still holding his new flag carefully, looked up at Rodriguez with the same serious expression he had shown the guard. "I'm sorry about your son," Tommy said simply, his 6-year-old voice carrying a weight of sincerity that surprised the adults around him. Rodriguez knelt down to Tommy's level, his eyes filling with tears. "Thank you, son. What you did today, it reminds me that there are still people who remember, who care. That means everything to families like mine." As the afternoon progressed, more and more people approached the Martinez family. Veterans, military families, and ordinary citizens who had been touched by Tommy's gesture wanted to share their own stories and express their gratitude. Each interaction reinforced the profound impact that one small act of respect could have on an entire community. Photography student Sarah Kim, who had been documenting life at Arlington for a class project, had captured the entire exchange between Tommy and Staff Sergeant Chen. As she reviewed the images on her camera, She realized she had documented something extraordinary, a moment of pure human connection that transcended age, rank, and circumstance. "This is going to change everything," she murmured to herself, understanding instinctively that these photographs would resonate far beyond her college assignment. As the Martinez family prepared to leave Arlington that afternoon, Tommy clutched Staff Sergeant Chen's flag with both hands, treating it like the precious gift it was. The weight of the moment hadn't fully settled in his 6-year-old mind, but he understood that something important had happened, something that connected him to his grandfather Miguel's legacy of service. Sarah Kim's photographs of the flag exchange were uploaded to social media that evening, and within hours they had been shared thousands of times. The images captured something that resonated deeply with people across the country: the pure innocence of a child's respect, meeting the solemn dedication of a soldier's duty. Veterans from around the world began sharing the story, adding their own comments about what Tommy's gesture meant to them. A retired Navy SEAL from California wrote, "This little boy understands what many adults have forgotten, that freedom isn't free, and those who guard it deserve our respect." A British Army veteran commented, "Respect knows no borders. This American child has honored all who serve." Within a week, Tommy's story had reached military families stationed around the globe. Soldiers serving in remote outposts shared the photographs with their units, finding comfort and renewed purpose in the reminder that their service was valued and remembered by the next generation. Staff Sergeant Chen, who had returned to his quarters that evening with Tommy's toy flag carefully preserved in a place of honor, found himself changed by the encounter. The small faded flag served as a daily reminder of why he had chosen to serve and why the mission of the Tomb Guards mattered so deeply. 3 months later, Tommy received an unexpected invitation. The 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment requested his presence at a special ceremony honoring military families. When the day arrived, Tommy walked proudly beside his grandparents, wearing his best clothes and carrying the flag that Staff Sergeant Chen had given him. Years later, when Tommy was asked about that day at Arlington, he would say simply, "I wanted the soldier to know that someone cared about what he was doing. My abuelo Miguel always said that when someone does something important for you, you should say thank you." The toy flag that Tommy had given to Staff Sergeant Chen was eventually displayed in the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment's museum, labeled simply, "A gift from a grateful American." And in Tommy's room in San Antonio, Staff Sergeant Chen's flag held a place of honor, a reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures can carry the greatest meaning. Tommy Martinez's innocent act of respect had indeed moved veterans worldwide, proving that the values of honor, duty, and gratitude could bridge any gap between generations.